It's exciting now because we're doing musical theater. The idea behind musical theater is important to us as Americans and American theater history. And I'm going to get into that into more detail. But our key concepts when it comes to musical theater, it's its own theatrical form. It's, like I said, America's biggest contribution to theater history. I want to give you a brief history of the American musical, stress the idea of the integrated musical, which was the most popular form of musical theater for decades, and talk a little bit about musical theater today. So why does the musical stand alone when studying theater? Of all of theater's history, you notice there's a chapter in your textbook that's dedicated to musical theater. And like I said, it's important as far as American theater history, and I get a little excited when talking about the American musical. Let's start with the idea of why it stands alone. It's not a genre. You can have dramatic, comedic, melodramatic musicals. All musicals have an artistic point of view that's not determined by a set kind of genre that it's trying to fit into. It's not considered a style. Styles are from the director's ideas and their interpretations and how they see the visual universe of the play. We'll talk about that more when we study directors. We consider it its own form. It might seem silly, but again, it is America's greatest contribution to the history of theater. It is to theater what jazz is to different musical historians. Jazz is a kind of music that was created here in our country and then spread in popularity. That's pretty much how it works with the American musical as well. Okay, here's the deal. Why the American musical is so special. Until the late 19th century into the 20th century, really theatrical popularity, what was popular, what was making a lot of money, was really all centered on European theater. European theater kind of led the way for any kind of cutting edge, what we would today call cutting edge, any kind of innovations within plays or storytelling, etc. Really, American theater artists produced and followed what was popular in other places, mostly Europe. With the invention of the American musical, we created an art form in theater that became very successful, and other people copied us. So going back to why theater is so special and the fact that now we are creating an art form that other people are copying. Long story short, American artists and producers did a mashup of European opera. Opera was the most popular form of entertainment in Europe. It uses a plot like a play, and it has extravagant sets. But now everything in an opera is sung. It is all set to music. There is no such thing as dialogue. It's called recitative, this singing the dialogue. And it's basically a mashup of that with American popular music and subject matter. Americans did not always enjoy opera. They thought it was a little highbrow, plus it was usually in French, German, Italian. The producers and theater artists in our country started taking or creating music that was like the popular music of the musical review, and they used that music with characters and a plot in a similar way that opera did, but they really focused on an idea of good musicals are not just plots with music, but they have this idea of integration. My next slide is going to be over that. Hey, the chapter in your book, The American Musical, I think it's one of the best, if not the best chapter in your whole textbook, so make sure that you read that. Most historians agree that the age of the Golden Age musical, begins with 1943's play Oklahoma by Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein. So, the idea of the integrated musical. By integration, it means that everything in the musical works together. If you remove one thing, it weakens the impact, the success of that musical. Plot dominates everything. There is a narrative story like a play. The musical numbers, they're not just about anything. They're not just to be pretty. The musical numbers are designed for there to be decisions made that move that plot forward. If you take out a song from a musical, that means the next scene isn't going to make sense. You're getting information in every song. And that decision-making process also helps build complex and interesting characters. The characters are very well developed in musical theaters because they're singing about themselves and why they're making their decisions and what they're planning to do. When you watch musicals, especially really good ones that rely on dance, that dance with the musical numbers helps solidify the characterization. You see in the dance numbers how the characters relate to one another, whether it's negative, whether it's positive. If you've ever seen the beginning, and if you feel like it, you should, and I should probably put a link here, you should go watch the beginning of West Side Story as it sets up the whole relationship between the dance gangs, the two different gangs that are fighting throughout the entire musical. Also, spectacle is very important in a musical. We're going back to Aristotle's dramatic values, but the visual universe, and this is something that comes from opera, the visual universe is grand. It's usually big things happening on stage, cars, helicopters, fields of grain. The visual universe, again, is servicing the plot and the characters and kind of keeping it all together. Again, it is about how everything works together. Okay, so I know I'm getting a bit repetitive here, but again, the big idea behind the integrated musical is that you remove one element and the musical is weakened. Okay, so we still enjoy Golden Age musicals. However, today there's a lot more flexibility, and a lot of that has to do with the popularity of different musical genre. We now see everything, like I say here, from The Lion King to Hamilton. Now we see plays that instead of being totally integrated, maybe there's a central idea or theme that really dominates. Maybe there's less dialogue and even more of the story is told through song. Look at Hamilton. And again, there's many different genre of music being used. I think it's also exciting because there's lots of experimentation in musicals today. It's as if there are no rules anymore.